Hello, this is Chris Ott once again, and this is part 10 of this series on metaphysics. And the discussion today is a comparison between the evolution of perception, which is my own developed theory of cosmology, how the world came to be, and Advaita Vedanta, which is a form of Hinduism that has some parallels, and I want to go over where those start and end, and why, for the West, the evolution of perception has some important benefits, and it would help you to understand Advaita Vedanta, the Hindu branch, but it's not the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into that. First of all, most people don't know what Advaita Vedanta is. Advaita Vedanta is a school or branch of Hindu philosophy. And it's became mature in the 8th century in India, in the hands of a philosopher named Adi Shankara, also known as Shankaracharya. And Adi Shankara developed it from ideas that he got from his own Buddhist master at the time, actually. And its importance is, they say, is a little exaggerated in the West since the 19th century, when British scholars were avidly studying Indian philosophy when it was a colony of India. They kind of exaggerated Advaita Vedanta because it was the closest to their own. Well, they liked it, I guess. Now, I wouldn't say it's close to Christianity. It was a little closer to the kind of thinking that was occurring in England, though, in the 19th century, which was called absolute idealism. And I'm not going to get into that because I'm not an expert in that form of idealism. But I know a little about Advaita Vedanta, and Meher Baba said that, well, it's a footnote in his book, God Speaks, by the editor, and it says that Baba's gnosis upholds the idea of Advaita Vedanta. In other words, there's no conflict between him and Advaita Vedanta. Now, Advaita Vedanta is religious. It's a doctrine. It's not, and it's something. It also has within it a practice. It's a mystical school, you could say, and mystics seek to unite with reality or whatever, and it has a pathway for that. And there's certain mantras that you perform, and meditations, and you try to, experience this oneness that it describes. They actually had a school a lot like this called Neoplatonism in the 2nd century in the Roman Empire. It's under Plotinus, or Plotinus was the philosopher who described it the best. And it was very similar. Well, in Advaita Vedanta, Advaita is Sanskrit, and Dvaita means two or dual or duality, and A means not, non. And it's funny, we have that same prefix in our English. And it means not two. It's another way of saying one, but it emphasizes a slight shade of difference in meaning. But the idea is very similar to the evolution of perception, where evolution of perception begins, because Advaita Vedanta is the belief that there's only one witness, and that is Brahman, and that everything else is an illusion. All phenomena is an illusion. Well, that's just like basically the evolution of perception, but there's kind of some differences, I'm going to say. And Advaita Vedanta, which I'm not saying it's not true, because my thinking is pretty much checks itself by what Meher Baba says, and he says it's true, so I take it as true, but I don't take it as perfectly expressed all the time. If you have a soul, which they call the Atma in Sanskrit, all souls are really the oversoul, or Brahman. So Atman, which means soul, is Brahman. So your soul is Brahman, and my soul is Brahman. And if you followed how I described the evolution of perception, you'll see that it's very familiar. That's basically what I was conveying. All of us are really, there's only one witness. In a sense, there's only one person here doing all the perceiving through each of us and experiences itself as us. And the goal is to have that not just as a philosophical exercise to think about, but to actually have the experience where you suddenly experience yourself as Brahman, which is what Baba talks about, what mystics talk about, what the Neoplatonists talked about. And they called this Brahman, they just called it the One. It's the same kind of idea. And they also had meditational exercises to try to experience oneself as the One, or unite with the One, or have mystical unity, it's been called. But the difference in the evolution of perception, one of them is that evolution of perception is a cosmology, and Advaita Vedanta is not. Advaita Vedanta is a dogma, it is a doctrine, it is a decided on conclusion from thinking by Adi Shankara, which anybody can go find in a library. They have his conjectures, vast and long, and how he came to this conclusion that Atman is Brahman. But there's no cosmology, and I'm going to say why that is a loss in it. And I'm not saying that once again, this isn't a criticism of Advaita Vedanta. I kind of accept it as a given that in its purest form, expressed right, it's probably right. But it's so easy to be misexpressed, and that's what I want to show. I'm going to play a little clip from a video that's online by a guy who I've never personally met, but he is a follower of Meher Baba, I'm told, and he calls himself Techno Baba, and he did this video called Be As It May, based on the words and teachings of Meher Baba's own master, who was a Hindu, and so is presumably an Advaita Vedantist. So I'm going to play a little piece of that. It's online for anybody to see. I'll have a link for it on the show notes. And I asked Techno Baba in an email for his permission to use this in this video, but I never got a reply, and it's been a couple weeks. So I think he wouldn't mind. If he does, I'll just remove it. But it shows the problem we're going to talk about. All right, I'm going to play that right now. Thank you. Hold on.
All the objects that are seen in the world are, really speaking, non-existent.
There ain't no wine and booze. There ain't no bars, no cheap saloons.
They are the transformation of one's own mind.
Okay, so these words are read by an actor. Upasni died in the 40s, but they're from the discourses of Upasni Maharaj, who was Baba's master, one of his masters. But he says, it gives the idea, it gives the feeling that the world, all this phenomenon is in your mind, all right? And that's the part I want to talk about. That's the part that isn't really intended. But it's how it comes off. Now, this is a common idea running around in our culture, it's New Age, probably comes from badly expressed Advaita Vedanta or incompletely expressed Advaita Vedanta, sources. I don't know. That's not my field. My field isn't Eastern philosophy, but I learned about it after I studied Western philosophy, just so that I could know, what they're doing. And also because I was developing this evolution of perception idea, I wanted to know what they said. By the way, the best source, they say, it's very enjoyable too, is the works of a guru from the 20th century named Nisargadatta Maharaj. And I'll leave a link, his name at least, in the show notes too. And he has a book called I Am That. And he was interviewed in the 70s by Europeans coming to his flat in Bombay and asking him to describe Advaita Vedanta, which he said he was perfect in Advaita Vedanta. He had actually had this oneness experience, and which he described to the people who came to interview him. And so the books are fascinating. But the main book, as I said, or the most popular, is I Am That. And, okay. Enough of that. So this point of it being all in your mind. Now, anybody who's been in a body for a while and has a mind, meaning has thoughts and things, knows that you can't change things with your thoughts. It's not like that. Things are involuntary. We're stuck here. We're born into a physical world governed by laws and a historical movement that at best we might have a small influence on. But if you're like stuck in prison, and you've lost your ability to walk or something like that, and you're just in a horrible situation, you're not going to be able to just think yourself out of that. That's kind of awfully New Age. There's some things you're stuck with that you have to endure. The most you can do with your mind is you can change your attitude about it, and that can make a huge difference. You could be practically suicidal about the conditions of your life, and then another day, because of a change in attitude, you could become functional again and even happy. So we don't want to understate the importance of change in attitude, and that's the sense in which you can change your life. And sometimes people turn their whole life around by a change of attitude, but it's not like you can bend the stars and things like that with your mind. Although in New Age thought, you theoretically you should be able to, but I don't think anyone's ever established that you can. So I want to say how the problem in communication. And then I'm going to show how this could never happen in evolution perception. I want to add also that I want to give some examples where you see it in the culture. This is a little teeny clip from a guy I like, and he walks around with his Chihuahua in Mexico, and he talks and he shows clips, and he's very into meditation. His name is Jeff Berwick. And Jeff Berwick here makes that same claim about the New Age claim about how you can change the world with your mind.
You connect through the meditation. So, just do it like every day. And not only can you change yourself, but you can actually change the world, because you're actually creating this whole world with your mind. It doesn't actually exist. I don't exist. Lucy doesn't exist. None of this actually exists. It's just something being created by your mind right now. And you get caught up in it. Okay, and then this is a meme or a picture with a caption that you'll see all over the internet. It shows Plato, a statue of Plato, and then it gives this quote, and it attributes it to Plato. But it's not aligned by Plato. Plato never would have said anything like that. And you can go and you can download The Republic or any of his works, and you will not find this line. The idea that you can change the world with your mind or your thoughts, or the world is in your mind. That would mean that there's like 8 billion worlds. And if there's people on other planets, there's even more. And what about the worlds in all the animals' minds? If they have minds, and I think they do. So this is just retarded. It's solipsism. It's everything that we try to avoid in real critical philosophy, I would say. The one thing, like if you fall into solipsism, the idea that everything's in your head, you've done something wrong and you need to just go back and go over it real carefully, because somewhere there's a mistake, because that is not the condition that we observe. We observe ourselves as being basically in the same world with all limited control over it. As they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, I can control the world as far as the reach of my arm. Well, that's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. It's always good to know the limits of what you can change. They say, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, that's kind of like a good attitude to have, a spiritual attitude. The idea that you're in control, well, it's all kind of called a megalomania. Okay, well, to get out of this confusion in Advaita Vedanta, they end up having to get into these confusing conversations about this self, and we don't mean this self or this, and then they say, well, there's really just one self, but the two selves idea is like a learning phase, because kind of like training wheels, because you have to understand that there's the Brahman is the real self, and then there's you, and that's the false self, or the phenomenal self, your body and your thoughts, and that's your phenomenal self, and that's not really yourself. That's not the witness, the real witness. But it's very hard. People just fall into everything's coming out of me. It's just not. You are coming out of Brahman. Okay, now, I think the reason that this has this problem, and people reading some of it but not enough fall into it. Well, first of all, it is part of New Age stuff. It sells books. It's sort of self-help. It's very hopeful. You can become super powerful, but it's the reason that it doesn't have the cosmology. If you take the cosmology of the evolution of perception, which has the same premise as Advaita Vedanta, which is that there's one original self, which is the witness, the seeing self, that doesn't see anything in the beginning because there's nothing to see. That's the whole point of a cosmology. It's what there is, the phenomena is going to arise out of a process, and I've talked about that at great length. But we see that, I'm going to put it on the screen, in a nutshell, this is the process. That I, on the left, is not an object, it is just a symbol for perception in its original state. And you continue, all witnessing continues to occur from that original state. And but then you have all these perceptual schemas that keep altering perception, use new ways of seeing, produce up the world, and then finally you get produced out of that process yourself. And that's those little eyes in the middle. They become kind of like lenses that the witness is perceiving through. But notice that the world does not come out of them, because notice that they come after the laws of nature, time, space, and the laws of nature like gravity and so forth. And they supervene upon them. So therefore, they cannot control the orbit of the planets, because they evolved after there were planets orbiting that way with all the laws and etc. I hope you can see that's the importance of the process. But you can see that it's still, that is the seer, in truth, and the seer that feels like we are, that's only the apparent seer. And you get this because you have the cosmology. Without the cosmology, I think you're much more likely to fall into this solipsism, this idea you alone exist and you're creating the world, and this megalomania and sort of New Age hopefulism on steroids. And be really confused and really not advancing. As a matter of fact, you'd be becoming more egotistical, which is the opposite of the goal of Advaita Vedanta, which is to forget even, and disassociate with your false self, which is your ego, which is your, all the things that you claim, that all the limitations really that you claim to be, because you're really infinite. And that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that I taught my daughter these ideas through the chart, which was in What Did Meher Baba Really Teach? I don't remember the number of the video. I'll put it on the screen. But I went over that method that I used, the same one my father did, and it uses the chart by Baba, and you never fall into this confusion, because you understand that you start the story with God waking and beginning to perceive in the world, evolving, and then finding himself in the world, and then taking himself to be the things in the world. But you get it, that it was all along the dream of Brahman, or God, or the Oversoul. It has so many names. Self with a capital S, the Witness, the One, by the Neoplatonists called it the One. And it's been called the Hen. It has many, many names. But they're not limited to get stuck in one concept. Or the Infinite Intelligence, another name. But anyway, I never fell into that idea. I've never thought that the world's coming out of me, because I was taught this way through a cosmology. And I taught my daughter that way, and I've had long conversations just about this in preparation for this talk. She totally agrees that if you don't learn it this way, I don't know, God help you, because you're going to get really confused. But if you learn it in terms of this cosmology, either my explaining of it or Baba's in his book God Speaks, in that chart, you will never have that side effect. It's a negative side effect of thinking about all these things. And I hope all that was clear. If not, I'll do an add-on another time. But anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.